tuning in to Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the impactful stories of real estate leaders across the United States. Every year, we take the time to bring you some of our favorite interviews from seasons past in our summer series. These episodes hold tremendous lasting value to you, our listeners. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this Beyond the Resume Summer Series throwback. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume.
All right, folks, welcome to this episode. I am your host, Chris Papa, and today, sitting next to me in New York is Mickey Penzer. Mickey, hi, Chris. And today, we are proud to have as our guest, Stephan Leeds. Stephan is launching a company called Springboard Communities. Stephan has a background, he'll get into it more in education and politics, and combining that now with real estate development to have a social impact. How you doing, Stephan? Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I wish I was sitting there with you. This is great. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, man. And so, man, I checked out Springboard. You're in DC today, but Springboard's based out of Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. We are piloting in the south and west sides of Chicago in some tough neighborhoods, which are really doing some awesome community organizing. And they're asking themselves, where does real estate play in that equation? So it's been a cool way to get to know Chicago, beautiful city, awesome people there. And I'm a New Yorker and DC guy from growing up and born in Paris. And so always fun to keep looking west.
Yeah. So why don't you give us a little breakdown of what Springboard is?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I really came from a background in a lot of education, and education brought us into politics and supporting good candidates and advocating for good policy. And what we saw in education was that school outcomes and student outcomes were really affected by the physical spaces around them and the real estate development. But for an educator or a community leader, it was a really tough gap between their specialty in their work and being able to influence real estate development. And the big blockers were mostly access to capital and knowing how real estate development works and having the right people in the room. So we help to try to bridge that gap by providing that capital and that know-how. And the goal is to use the real estate development as a business and financial model, but also to be able to really raise outcomes from education, but also, it touches on environment, it touches on food systems, on criminal justice reform. So the goal is some stability and some wealth creation through our work.
You're a do-gooder.
I guess an aspiring do-gooder. I made a little trouble in my life, but always had a real passion for education and for people, and a big belief that everyone deserves the opportunity to build the type of life that they want. I was very lucky in my life to be well supported and have great people around me like Mickey. And, I think from now it's seeing if we can start to do something at a systems level or really a really tangible impact. Aspiring do-gooder for sure.
Where did that come from? I mean, is that something you're raised by your family doing to do that?
Yeah, it was. My mom's side is Indian and my dad's side is German and Jewish. My mom's side really came to the U.S. after getting caught up in some of the craziness of politician. And she moved to Delhi and then over to South Carolina and Philly and New York, but really came with just an education. And then my dad's side, both sides escaped Germany during the Holocaust. My grandfather from Hamburg and my grandmother had been lucky enough to get to Paris a little earlier until you couldn't stay in Paris anymore. And they really came with just an education. And so they were all able to set up good lives for themselves. And I think especially on my dad's side, they went from private industry into working in education. I'm kind of genetically predisposed to trying to do a little bit of good, leave things a little bit better than we found them, as my grandmother used to say. So I was kind of born in this, how do you work within the systems we have to try and improve things incrementally, but hopefully substantially.
And so you said you were born in Paris. Was your family living there? You lived there? Or were you born there?
Yeah, my parents were there for 8 years and I was born 3 years in. So if my math is correct, that gave me till I was 5 there.
Yeah.
And Paris was, it was awesome. I don't remember it, but I always love to go back. And they were there for business. So they'd been in the US for a while and my dad was working in some media and working on the international branch of the company. With that, I think he asked my mom one time if, she was open to working in or to living and raising the kids in Paris. And although I am totally wowed at my mom's ability to raise 4 kids, I'm the youngest of 4, in a new country where she didn't speak the language. I think she's very happy she did. And yeah, it's tough to complain, c'est pas mal, as we would say.
Your family's risk takers. I mean, it seems like they are willing to take a chance.
Yeah, I think everyone's got their own risk and reward thresholds. But I'd say we're big travelers and love to see new ways of living, new styles, and new styles of cities. But, most of all, we like to eat new food.
Yeah. What did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a kid, did you have an interest in education or real estate or anything like that?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, Chris. When I was 13 or 14, I think I told my mom and dad, I said, what I really want to be when I grow up is a trophy husband. Um, it's changed a lot, but I think I always had a passion for education. I always had a real interest in again, the people around me. And I think that took a little bit to get over to what you want to do work wise and what you really want to spend such a big portion of your time with. But I tell you, it tells you a lot once you find it if you weren't really looking for it, because you're like, oh my goodness, like I could do this for the next 5 to 50 years, which is unexpected.
Well, I think it'd be easier to be a trophy husband now than it was then. Like then that would have been controversial, but now there's so many successful women who can't find a nice dude. So I think you'd have an easier time being a trophy husband now.
My timing was terrible. Oh,
Dang.
that's not too late. That's right. Millennials switch jobs so often that it could be a stint. Just kidding. But I think it's a great point. Like, I have 2 big sisters and a mom who are all a lot smarter and cooler than I am. And I'll give it to my brother and my dad too. But they have amazing careers, and a lot of what I do, the successful parts of what I do come from them, and the rest of it I take credit for.
So you grew up in DC. Did you go to college? And then if so, did you study to be a teacher?
No, but it's an awesome question, Chris. I love the question. I did go to college. I went to Cornell University. They have a hotel school there, which kind of feeds restaurants, hotels, but also finance and real estate. And I had a real estate minor there. Loved Cornell, especially when it was above 0 degrees, and always had a passion for the business development side. I actually worked in tech up to starting Springboard, really tech education, and some exposure to politics was my background. And I wanted to be a teacher, and I had volunteered in some charter schools. I volunteered in some public schools and additive programs that they have around schools. So things like after school or weekend programs. And it was actually such a shame. Like, I started looking into teaching, and and some of our policy work has been around this, but it was such a tough gig. Like, I wanted to be a teacher. I loved kids, and they basically worked harder, made less money, didn't get the autonomy, didn't get the upward mobility. Like, there's a lot of things we're working on as far as, making it's obviously so important. Education system of today is our economy of tomorrow. Having great teachers and role models for the students is one of the most important parts. And I think, as the country, we owe so much to teachers and probably have some debt to start paying back.
Yeah. I mean, my mother she worked in the public education system. And so I was exposed to the limiting monetary benefits of the teacher my entire life. And so I actually explored that. I was a substitute teacher in college, and I was thinking about doing that. And I actually took my teacher's exam, like the praxis. Then I realized that, there's a lack of mobility. It's like, kind of go there until you're tenured. I mean, being a teacher, I'm sure, can be amazing too, but it just seemed like I had more of a entrepreneurial spirit or something like that. But yeah, they don't really make it, there's not, the carrot at the end of the stick, I guess, is you're helping kids. Beyond that, sometimes it can just be like teachers become very institutionalized, I feel.
Yeah. And taken for granted. I hear you. But I mean, I think the amazing thing about them is passion driven, right? It's a calling. I mean, people become teachers because they love it. And I'm sure your mom was that way, but I think it's because a lot of times I think they're driven by so much passion and love for kids and the work that they put up with, maybe too much sometimes. And I know I have good relationships with some folks from the NEA and AFT and teachers unions, and they're heroes of mine, but it's something where, there's always this kind of push and pull where they do everything because they really love the work, and that love and respect needs to be reciprocated. And what did your mom teach?
No, she was a school nurse. So she was involved with that. She had the same pay scale as the teachers and stuff. I don't like a job that says if you work at 5% of your capacity or 105% of your capacity, you're still going to make the same amount. Like that didn't make sense to me.
There's pros and cons to the union. The pro is that there's strength in numbers, but the con is that it allows for that. You can't reward good teachers because you're not allowed to. And you have to keep bad teachers on just because they're tenured. I've run schools because my mom runs a not-for-profit that runs schools, and it is really difficult when you have good teachers you want to reward and bad teachers you'd love to get rid of, but they make it really difficult on you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mickey, you're totally right. I mean, it's not a black and white question, right? Around the unions.
Teachers insurance in New York is really good.
Good. I mean, I think one thing I would say is, all the high performing school systems in the US have strong unions. And not every system that has a strong union is a high performing system. But it is just about, I think it's such a collaborative and it's such a fun thing about working around education or community development, right? Is everyone really is interested in kind of moving the ship forward. And I know there's outliers to that, but I think it's such a winning piece to have a collective voice be represented in the discussion, and albeit not without its complications. And, the second thing is, Chris, to your point about your mom, one of the things that Springboard really is built around, and, why your mom is another hero of mine already, is the Learning Policy Institute is a research hub out of California, and they find a 15-to-1 return for every dollar spent into school wraparound services. And that's pretty wild for society, for a 15-to-1 return as a place to invest. And so there have been this movement of community schools around the country, which are schools that recognize that being a good school for, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. is great and needs a lot of attention, but having the stability and support for these kids and making sure they're kind of coming in ready to learn is necessary, right? So these are schools that kind of address things going on outside the classroom through engaging the community and through fostering leadership locally and connecting with resources. These are schools that are starting to address these kind of community-wide obstacles towards good education. And the exciting thing is that it's a really efficient way to invest in communities and invest in societies using the school as a real hub for it. And we've all seen this with either our own kids or, in conversations. Like, people have a funny way of putting their self-interest aside when it's a generational discussion. And I think that's really powerful to frame something in a way that we're thinking long-term and generationally, but also in a kind of collective, I'm missing the word, but but looking out for others primarily.
So I was going to say, go back to so you had a passion for education, you studied real estate, and then of course, naturally you went into tech sales. How did that happen?
That happened. Well, so I worked in a couple different tech companies. I worked for a VC fund in New York for a summer called Great Oaks Venture Capital, awesome group and really some cool investments that they make. I worked for Fundrise, which is a real estate crowdsourcing tech company, and they've done quite well. They were really one of the early ones in the space, some in marketing, some in education tech. And then I worked for a software company, when I went into sales in a full-time capacity, it was with a company called Bartender. There was software for bars, restaurants, hotels, airlines, really people who serve liquor and needed to take inventory and do better cost control. Great group, awesome software, saved people time and money, which was it's nice to work for something you believe in, right? Especially if you got to sell it. So it was an awesome 2 years. I started out as an entry-level salesperson, ended up being their lead on sales development for the company, and still very close with them. And still always looking to help out. But it was really kind of a stopover to learn more about business development. I always kept an ear and a foot towards education, community development, and probably never stopped talking about it as much as I should have.
So what's all this got to do with real estate? Can you tell us more about how all of this now feeds into what you're doing in real estate with this education and with everything?
Yeah, because you've never developed a property before on your own, right?
That I was going to say, I know a lot less about real estate than definitely you too. And I'm sure most people that you've had on as guests and have the pleasure of working with day to day. The real estate model really popped up because we started by saying, with access to political capital, some social capital, access to some financial capital, and I had some early support from some family offices around the work, and with access to all this innovation and nonprofits and social entrepreneurship, right, with this social economy that's popping up, we know we can build a better type of community. And what does that look like? And so the two things that really we popped up on a lot were, one, that there was a lack of a safety net in most communities, right? The fact was that 78% of full-time workers, not just Americans, but 78% of full-time workers live paycheck to paycheck, right? Over half of Americans can't afford $400 in emergency expenses. And so we said, well, we need, there's real value of community to be able to support and stabilize and help each other out. So we felt like, and we're not the first ones to say it, a lot of better minds than mine have pointed out, right? There's really kind of a breakdown of traditional going on across the country. So one was around, we wanted to build more stable and supportive communities. And the second one was that we saw that there was right, and for some of the same stats, right, there was such a challenge in accumulating individual wealth and having access to resources. So the reason we really dove into real estate was we said, in a lot of these communities, there's the ownership, the home ownership or the rates of just owning assets in the community or stocks or things that can grow were really low. And so when we started kind of digging into that more, we saw that, the other thing that happened in a lot of really low cost neighborhoods is those home ownership rates were even lower. And they all kind of had this question of, hey, we know we're not going to be able to afford to live here for a while, especially around urban cities, right? We've all kind of seen the process of economic development and, slash gentrification. And they really sat there and said, well, what's the point of it continuing to invest into our community if we know that in 10 years, it won't be our community anymore? And I think that's the biggest cost of gentrification is not the displacement, but is that it disincentivizes people from investing in their communities. And so we looked at real estate ownership as the solution to a lot of these, in that they could own growing assets in their community, that they would have a seat at the table in terms of development and actually be the owner, right? And have the chance to really steer local development or sell properties. But in order to have that say, real estate ownership is crucial. And that comes with the question of, well, what do you do with the real estate? And so really it's all around letting the community with development partners, with the expertise and with access to capital, like, hey, let them sit in the driver's seat of this real estate development process. And so it became around selecting democratically and lifting up community leaders who had a real vision for their community. And so real estate's really just a tool for the community leaders as they continue to build it, as they continue to build up their community and make it a little stronger. That's a mouthful. Where can I dive deeper in?
Well, let's start at the beginning here. So you had an idea to do this. I mean, you have some business development experience. You have experience with creating efficiencies through some of your tech platforms. How did you start? I mean, you're like, Chicago, like, who was the first person you talked to in Chicago? Like, we're going to do this. Like, how did that start?
Yeah, we actually started looking in Baltimore because, we sat down with Ray Lewis, the Ravens, Hall of Fame Ravens linebacker.
Oh, yeah. You got Ray Lewis on the phone. How do you sit down with Ray Lewis?
I showed up to Tao for a meeting. It was Tao over at 9th and 14th, little free advertising for them. But I showed up to Tao and there was an organization there called Power 44 that was focused on social impact. And the meeting was set up by some folks actually in the crypto space. And they were, I think, looking for investment from Ray. And we were meeting with one of Ray's associates who ran the nonprofit, which was about taking in, people who had recently been incarcerated and helping them get jobs and build solar panels. And they had a really cool business model. And so we started chatting with them. And we said, great, let's do Baltimore. And I spent a while networking in Baltimore and continuing to learn around community development as well as the local market and networking. And but to answer your question, like the way all these networking has happened is I think people find it really compelling, this idea of building more inclusive economic development models and creating opportunity for some people who really need it, right? And that's nothing new. And so it's kind of wild, the twists and turns and where it leads you.
Under Armour has been pushing a lot of the community development in Baltimore.
For sure. Yeah. We spoke with some folks from Under Armour. Johns Hopkins done a lot there as far as investing into real estate, as well as some development around and supporting some projects. No, there were a couple of big players. And if you've seen, downtown Baltimore and some areas have really started to boom. It's a cool city. I grew up in DC most of my life. So, and then family was in New York. So I kind of have driven through it a bunch, and then starting to get to know it at another level is always fun with the new city.
Lance Moore is also from Baltimore, who's now the executive director of Robin.
Oh, really? That's our goal. So we looked into it a year or two ago, and there was some cool investment going on. And I think, whether you're looking at opportunity zones, you're looking at local leaders and local businesses and individuals who've done really well. there's so much cool community investment going on, and so looking at how you can kind of do shared ownership so that that investment creates wealth in the right pockets is really quite.
How do you convince them to invest with you? Did you come up with a business plan, or like, what was you have like, oh, we have this property, and like, and specifically, what type of properties are you actually investing in?
Sure. So the model right now, the development model ways that the structure that we use is a real estate investment co-op model. And that does two things. One, it enables this shared ownership and a lot of collective action because everyone owns a share and they can participate even if they're not really ready to buy homes, right? Because a lot of people are not great fits for it yet, but they can participate at different levels and start to get shares in the co-op. So it kind of allows you to split up the ownership into shares like a corporation. The second bit it does is it allows you to kind of have a local board. The board of that co-op can be comprised of local leaders. And so it means you have a kind of governance structure to decide what's going on with the real estate development. And as far as the type of projects we're doing, and this is this is for community development interest, but we keep it really wide open. Our first projects we're looking at currently, we're acquiring our first homes. We work with some education partners there that we engage some kids who've gone through a lot of tough backgrounds, but have to go through the social emotional healing to get there and then kind of develop some skills and get jobs that are quality union jobs, $50,000 to $70,000 a year. And once they're making money, the question is, well, what kind of assets do they put it into? What kind of, what kind of home are they supposed to live in? And these things are skills that they don't know how to navigate. When I needed to learn how to navigate, right, I call my mom, and I think there's not always a support network around. But so right now we're starting with housing, but the model can invest into commercial properties, can invest into civic projects, infrastructure, housing. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but the goal is really to have a central body of community leaders with a great vision, collective ownership around them. Those have all the ties to community need, which can mitigate some risks and help out with the future work. But the model is really about saying, hey, with development partners, what can't they develop, right? As long as it's a good real estate plan and environmentally sustainable and inclusive to the community, those are kind of our three right check boxes for any projects we take on. But it's a diverse range of real estate assets. The goal is to be able to develop for community plans and needs.
And so you find a house, right, in Chicago, or are you building this from like scratch, or you find one and you fix it up?
Yeah. So in Chicago, they have a good number of vacants. They also have some of our community-based organization partners are rehabbing houses already and teaching kids construction skills. And so there's kind of these other players in there who find houses. But yeah, our goal is to get the kid in a house that's basically turnkey, but help the kid understand, how do you pick that house, right? How do you finance that house? How do you boost the value of your home and by investing in the community? So there's all these kind of almost curriculum that we build out for students around real estate ownership, trying to make smart real estate owners and even some developers.
And so you find the house and you get some investors, right? Is that correct? You get like maybe like a big outside investor and then a couple of community investors to own this property?
Yeah, that ballpark. Yes. I mean, it'll vary the capital stack for even each one, but yeah, that's the idea, right? A little bit of philanthropy, some debt financing, and some community investment, time-wise as well as money-wise.
And then you find someone who needs a place to live, and then you put them in there, and then they have access to all these different community things to help them, like just guide them in their life.
Yeah. So let me tell you, I mean, you were asked why Chicago. The reason why Chicago is, one, it's growing, but this is just why it works. But it's growing. Population some projections have a doubling in population by 2030. I mean, it's going through a lot of change right now. But the biggest reason we landed on Chicago is actually our local partner there. A guy named Dr. Flavian Prince runs an organization called Meta 24, and they are, like I said, they're re-engaging kids. We kind of have a 5-step process that goes from skills to jobs to wealth accumulation, which they're already doing these 3 things. And so they are really provide kind of an education to community pipeline. So those are our future homeowners, our future business owners, and they're the ones who fuel the need for a lot of real estate development, is that there's folks already on the ground spurring the economic activity.
Gotcha. And so you have 2 of these now in Chicago, right?
Our local partners have been working there for 20, 30 years. Where we're picking our first 3 to 5 houses with some of the students who come out of the program. And so it's first development. So the real estate part, we're actively figuring out.
Yeah. So you found some local real estate developers too. You didn't. So you had to bring some local. Is it some like nonprofit developers, or you find some just people who wanted to help the community, or how did you find the community, the real estate development people?
I would say we because our partners have been working there for 20 years, they had a great network across schools, governments, businesses, community-based organizations, and definitely some real estate development firms that we have lined up as local partners that can help kind of cut some of our learning curves about the local conditions as well as real estate development overall. I would say, or we place a heavy emphasis on kind of delegating expertise about what works in the community, right, to this proven community leaders. I use a similar strategy in my hiring and management, right? And my role is really to continue to adhere to the vision and advocate relentlessly for the community, but mostly bring in the right resources. So having people there who have navigated these, we're working with folks who set up real estate investment co-ops. We're working with folks who've done local development and just kind of doing it in a way that, what I learned from tech was right, start small and have something that can. So as we go, we wanted to grow a lot in Chicago, and it's something that we're hoping to work in other markets as well.
So in summation, your advice is to partner to your weaknesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say, to your question, how do you get a meeting with X, right? It's my strength was around listening and supporting and pulling together the right people. And so, yes, I would say for the community development, for understanding what it's like in these communities, we brought on local partners. For understanding real estate development there, we brought on those. So yeah, I'd say it's starting with, there's a great exercise called Leadership Compass, but there's all these different ways that you can start to really kind of chip away at your strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, I'd partner or hire or do something about covering up your weaknesses.
What does Springboard look like now as far as the employee?
So we got I started it in August 2018. That's when I got the nerve to quit my job and really start focusing on this. In that time, we had gotten support from the Colorado University School of Education. We did a service agreement with them. They sent over three PhD students. And NYU, they have a Furman Center and they run a program called Capstone around sending professors and students. And so their real estate school, graduate school has sent over 4 students and professor. But it's all really been kind of partnering and building the model. And now we're kind of getting to that rubber hits the road part. As far as, full time, it's mostly, it's really about our local partners, and we have some great support from board members. But it's really, we're in a kind of fundraising to build boards and bring on the first houses stage. So we're early.
It's awesome. And what has been the hardest part so far?
No, honestly, it's a fun part because it's like, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you guys put together, but we can do that offline sometimes, but how you put together your organization. But, there's this kind of there are consistent light bulb moments, but in order to need a light bulb moment, you got to go through some of the confusion, right? And so, yeah. It's a consistent, like there's something to figure out. And, I research and network and get to a light bulb moment, and then that leads to more questions. So I think there's this continuous cycle of, when you're building something new with its proven models, it's a combination of research and not sleeping and thinking about it. But, it's the hardest part, honestly, has been, I think that with something that's early stage and new, that it's about building up the credibility and resources to continue to validate it. And it just takes time to figure things out and to bring it on, kind of to continue building that movement.
And so I think if you were going to move into start doing this in, say, I don't know, Memphis, Tennessee, right? The first thing you would do is find some local community leaders or some local partners on the ground there and just call them up and say, hey, this is what I'm doing here. Are you interested in participating?
Yeah, basically, I would say the buy-in is essential from the community, from the community leaders as well as the rest of the community. So, when Chicago, they're saying, we're not sure we're going to be able to afford to live here in 10 years. What's our role in that process? But right, it starts with successful community leaders. And, I think one of the big things you learn really quickly when you start looking into community development is communities don't change because of outside parties, and they don't change according to outside parties' timelines or investment models. If you want it to come from within the community, right? I mean, there's other ways to change communities without having them on the table, but you want to do things inclusively or collaboratively with them. And it's a lot of the listening and supporting. So yeah, the first thing is, and we have a lot of interest from a lot of different markets, but I keep telling people we have to figure out it works before we take people's time up with it. But it starts with leaders with a real vision and a great network to kind of start building a movement locally. And Dr. Prince, what he's built in Chicago is, I mean, it's incredible. I studied school systems. We toured international school systems with some of my education work before. We toured successful school models. What they can do with kids who've been kicked out or dropped out or sent to jail from these really tough, already from the toughest schools in Chicago. Like you meet these kids, I think of a girl, Cece, who I've had this awesome chance to work with and learn from when I've been in Chicago. Like the kids are amazing and incredible. And she's taught me stuff about entrepreneurship that, right, like after working in tech, it starts with, right, someone you really want to invest in, a community that you want to invest in. And that,
So your role now, what's your role now? Are you going around? I mean, you and Mickey, you guys can tell it, but you guys met on a panel. I mean, what was the point of that panel?
so what?
Through our mutual friend David Holman.
Oh yeah.
So, and then we sat on a panel together.
Why were you on that panel, Stephan?
Well, it was an impact panel. It was called Total Impact, which was great. And it was all about how to use real estate and housing. What are investment opportunities in real estate and housing that have the positive social impact? And Mickey is quite brilliant on the frontier of a lot of the practices going on. And I guess they brought me on to be the crazy guy talking about something new.
Well, so the point of the conference was that there are a lot of family offices and foundations that are interested in investing and getting a profit, but also creating social impact. So there were 4 people on this panel. One was Nathan Tapp from Jonathan Rose, who's their head of acquisition. One was Nadav, and he does a lot of Class C, Class B housing. And then I was on to talk about it from like the family office foundation perspective. And because my mom works in a lot of these communities, and so we have like a different on the ground perspective. And then Stephan was there to talk about a lot of the community aspect, because you really can't do this kind of stuff without engaging the community, because it won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And you won't do it right, because we can come in and say we think we know what needs to be done, but without the actual users, it would be like creating a product without beta testing. Nobody would do that, because you need to know someone's going to buy the product. And just because it's a captive audience doesn't mean they shouldn't also have to say how it happens. That's a lot of the reason why we had Stephan on, because we work with a lot of these community leaders.
Stephan, are you always looking for new family offices to invest with you?
For sure. We're always looking for partners and supporters of the idea. And we're trying to build a little bit of a new dynamic for development, which we call democratic development. I think just to back up and I appreciate you raising it, Chris, because yeah, absolutely. I mean, this work takes resources, and we have the right pieces in play, and there's kids who need homes, and there's a new vision, right, that we're really trying to work towards. And I think a big part of it, Mickey, you touched on, is that people deserve the say, right? And to go geeky in economics for a little bit, and when you say in economics that if not all stakeholders are present when they're putting together deals, that leads to negative externalities, right? Or externalities, just some of which happen to be negative. And I think that's what we've seen a lot of in development, is that when these things are ignored, these cycles start to pop up of poverty, of dependence. I mean, it's complex and they're holistic issues, but I think it starts with having everyone get their fair say in it. And then the second half, I'd say the real estate argument here. And so there's my geeking out on economics. And then here's my like self-deprecating. I read Real Estate Investing for Dummies when I was first starting out in the yellow book.
Yeah.
And it talks about in these neighborhoods, right? It's like real estate's about, if you're investing in less established markets, it's about investing or building in the path of progress, right? And so with my education background, I said, well, a lot of people are already generating some progress, right? Can we connect, community development and education and economic opportunity that's popping up, or activity that's popping up from it, and help kind of create a new cycle, right? Where that economic activity is shaping the community around it, and then that's going up in value, and then you can invest it back into the community, right? So it's about this kind of new cycle it's a local economy, really.
Yeah. You're an amazing guy, man. It's awesome. I personally would like to get involved, and hopefully. Do you take on like volunteers, or how's that work? An individual like myself help in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we take cash and checks. No, I'm just kidding. But I think there's so many ways to get involved. Like I said, I really come in and love to listen and learn from the community, but from folks in the real estate world and folks in education, people who, I mean, the cool part about community work is investing in communities is proven to boost happiness. But it's proven to invest civic engagement, education outcomes, health outcomes, right? Environmental education. Like we get so much interest from groups working in each different part of these communities, which is the cool thing about community, right? It kind of touches on everything. And so we're always looking for new perspectives, new supporters, board members, volunteers, hires, funders. It's movement building. And I think that everything we do is around collaboration and inclusion, and sustainability.
As you build out your company, we can be here to advise on that. And for self-plugging, we are recruiters. So we're happy to at least, donate our time and advice on how you can build out your organization and those kind of things. So at least you have us at a minimum on that.
Well, let's get into our rapid fire question. It's not really rapid fire, but we just have these kind of standard questions we ask all our guests. Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready. I'm in the hot seat.
What is your favorite book or most influential book that you recommend to someone?
The End of Average, I read about a year ago. It's a book by Todd Rose. He does brain. He's a neuroscientist at Harvard. He talks about how everyone needs to follow their own path, like their own timing. Their skills are contextual, and he just talks about how measuring things on average, like looking at the average numbers or the average performance, usually serves to slow down productivity and efficiency rather than boost it. And the example they use is the U.S. Air Force was having a lot of crashes and underperforming until they started customizing the cockpits to the pilots rather than customizing the cockpits to the average pilot. And the U.S. Air Force did pretty well after that.
Gotcha.
Do you have any podcasts besides CBG Real Estate that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yes, I actually am a big fan of a podcast called Community Made, which is a lot to do with finding your balance between your work and your life, but also brings on amazing guests like, from Gary Vaynerchuk to, and so on, right? So it's a lot of big entrepreneurs who build large businesses, but they kind of go a layer deeper into the people who help them get there and the type of life that you really want as you continue to do this type of work. And I've loved that one. And then I listened to some, I'm a Dr. Death fan and some other ones, but Community Made has been really big in figuring out my own calendar, schedule, work-life balance, and kind of keeping the right mentality day in, day out, which helps, hopefully will help me successful.
Speaking of work-life balance, I'm big into meditation and like working out. Do you have anything in your life that kind of keeps you balanced and centered?
100%. I mean, I'm a basic guy. I just mean, I'm very close with friends and family, and I try and do something, fun, like purely social and separate from work, which sometimes I have a tough time doing unless there's other people in the room. So one, I'd say the people in my life I'm so grateful for, and I'm lucky to have them, and hopefully the feeling's mutual in some cases. But I worked out. I like to go, I run a couple times a week. I lift times a week, and I do breathing exercises 10 times a day, even if it's just for 30 seconds or less. I find just focusing on my breathing, and the science is there, right? When you focus on your breathing and you slow down, it activates certain systems in your body that make you calm, collected. I think of work a lot like I think athletes probably approach their game, right? Where I want my mind and body to be well rested, and that keeps me from saying too many stupid things.
We have a lot of young listeners who are, just starting out in their career. Do you have any advice you would have given your 20-year-old self?
This is funny. It's mine kind of one of my things I would say, and it ties in with the End of Average, but it's also like this Facebook ad pops up and I'm slightly insulted by it, but it pops up in my newsfeed all the time. And it says, you don't have to start your career in your 20s. and it means don't work in your 20s. Like, I just think and in school too, right? Like there's so much stress and anxiety in schools right now that, I think a lot of it's caused, and I had this when I was younger, right? Is like, what do I want to do? Like, I know I have some skill, but like, what do you do with it? What do I want to do? And I think enjoying that question and taking your time with it would be my advice, because life has a lot of answers, which can be fun for a little bit, but right, it's mostly about enjoying the path you get there. And if you're beating yourself up consistently because of expectations that you have for yourself or others, right, have for you, like, then it's going to be really tough to enjoy. And so it's,
A lot of new research that used to be people thought you should specialize, but that actually people who are generalists and who, especially earlier on in their life, experiment with multiple things, get farther
there's a great book.
or specialize.
There's a great book that I could have listed instead of End of Average, right? Called Reach, that I just read.
Yeah, I'm reading it now too.
Oh, so that's when it's awesome. You're spot on. It just talks about how, but I don't think that it's the only winning strategy is to be a generalist, but I just mean your balance between generalizing and being more specialized, like that balance should be represent you and where you're at. Like you shouldn't start specializing until you're crazy about something. And then it gets a lot easier to specialize.
And our last question, what do you look for when you're hiring someone to work for you?
One of my favorite quotes around it is, and this is post-hire, so I'll go back a little bit. But one of my favorite quotes is, if you hire someone and within 30 days, you don't have a moment where you say, man, I'm glad that I hired you. Like, it's not a great sign, right? Like, great people, you have a spark with, and there's some kind of a chemistry that happens really between you guys. I think that leads to a lot. So, when it's a line I always try and balance with partners or with hiring. Just like, I like to prepare. I like to know a lot about them, but I also like to go in really open-minded and really authentic, right? And to try and hear what they have to say and see how they present themselves. So what I would say is, I always look for people who are smarter than I am, and doesn't take much.
You're so. Well, Stephan, it's been a pleasure. You have built an amazing company.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, we're going to follow you, and hopefully everyone else will, and kind of see how this progresses, and look forward to.
We'll have you back on in a year or two.
Yeah, you can tell us about all the different projects you're doing, and Springboard, and being in different communities now, all over the U.S.
Well, that's the plan. Definitely, would love to be back on. Always a pleasure, Mickey and Chris. Like, it's the work you guys do. Beyond that, we're going to definitely be using you for hiring. I mean, it's like, I think the impetus for this work is that there's great people with a lot of skills, and you guys are definitely in that. And we're all together, we put our heads together and kind of work towards a common goal. Some exciting, fun things can happen. I really do appreciate you having me on, and I'll look forward to catching up in New York soon.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast, where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. We're grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com.